Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in paints.
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, for the first time in 2023, it's Frank. How are you today?
Hey, buddy. How are you today?
I am doing well. The sun is shining somewhere in the world, probably, and I'm alive. So what more can you ask for?
We have made it. We have made it to another year. Another year of Beer with Geeks begins now.
Has the luster of the 20s worn off? Not in like they were great years, but more in like we're in the future. We're in the 2020s. Like, you know, is it like we're in 2023 now? Like, does it feel like, wow, I said 2023, is it the future anymore? You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, it has worn off but I feel that way every year, right? Like a decade ago, I was like, wow, we're in the 2010s. Like Arthur C. Clarke wrote a book about 2010. You know, but when you got there, was it really that special? It was like, no, it's okay. It's 2010.
Just another year, just another number, just another thing. No, I understand. You know? Yeah. There's something about the 2020s in as a future number that just sounded so far away in the way that 2000, 2010, 15, whatever, just didn't the same way. But that luster is waning. You know, but 2050 though, I mean, that'll be the thing. That'll feel that. Yeah,
I mean, I think about, you know, like my daughter was born last year, and she'll be, you know, when she graduates from high school, that'll be the class of 2040, right? And that sounds like a futuristic number that, like, wow, we'll have flying cars by then, type of thing. But when we get there, it'll be like, oh yeah, can you believe? Like, you know, we thought we'd have flying cars, but we still have cars on the road, and some people still drive fossil fuel cars. Can you believe that?
True.
You know, like it won't be that crazy as it feels. I mean, when I graduated high school in 2007, and I remember that feeling like it was such a futuristic number, and now it's like forever ago. So yeah, I don't know. You know, these numbers sound futuristic when you get there, and it's like, oh, it's the same. Table.
What you just said reminded me of this book I'm reading. It's called The Skeptic's Guide to the Future: What Yesterday's Science and Science Fiction Tell Us About the World of Tomorrow.
Ooh, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, the world of tomorrow. And I will send it to you if you need me to, unless you remember the name. But it's basically a futurist writing about why the future through science fiction never ends up being reality, and what our actual, how can we actually predict the future or where we're going, and why it's very difficult to actually predict where things are going. And one of the things that he writes about is this idea that people blanket technology, like, oh, well, I'll flying cars, because that's because we tend to be like one technology. We think that one technology will just completely revolutionize the way that we do everything, and it will and the better thing will take the place of something less or less good, which is history shows that's actually not the case. Like VHS versus Betamax, a Blu-ray versus HD in HD disc or whatever that other one was, you know, and stuff like that.
DVD.
Yeah, right. And then the what was the other one? The hydrogen engine versus the combustible engine versus like all these different things that we like think will like change the way that we do everything, and it actually they either go away or they change very little. There are very few things that you can pinpoint, science things that you can pinpoint that like actually revolutionized the world. Like the cotton gin, but like how many other things were invented between the cotton gin and like the next revolutionary thing, like the light bulb. But like even the light bulb, you had like AC currents and DC currents, and you had filaments, and you had this, and like the better one didn't win. The one that got out to the public faster won, which is something different. So yeah, it's just very interesting. I do recommend it's a good read.
That sounds great. I'm gonna put that in the show notes for anyone who's curious, because my curiosity is piqued by that, and I'm sure others will too. So
yeah,
yeah.
Anyway, that was all prelude to say, Frank, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking from the Rising Tide Beer Company of Portland, Maine. I'm drinking their Uncle Neal Pre-Prohibition Lager.
Ooh.
I was up in the Portland, Maine area back around Thanksgiving, and they had a great sale, Thanksgiving week sale on 6-packs, like mix and match 6-packs. So I picked up a bunch of stuff that I wouldn't otherwise buy to take home. I was like, oh, okay, I got a bunch of interesting beers I can try on Beer with Geeks.
That's cool.
So I'm sipping their Pre-Prohibition lager, and it's really, really good. It's a hoppy lager. I expected it to be sort of a less hoppy thing, but it is a hoppy lager, and it is again never filtered, never pasteurized, 6% ABV, and it's delicious. It's lovely. I love it, and it's funny because my wife has an Uncle Neal, who spells it the same way that it's spelled on the can, which is sort of a fun thing. So
that sounds great.
It's their Pre-Prohibition and recipe lager. What about yourself? What are you drinking?
I am not drinking a beer. I haven't, truthfully, I haven't really replenished my supply in some time. So I'm going in a different direction, and I'm drinking a Maker's Mark whiskey, straight up. Nothing special about it, just whiskey,
Bourbon.
Whiskey in a jar.
Love it.
It's very good.
I used to be a Scotch guy, and the last couple of years, I am a bourbon guy. I realized that I picked the wrong whiskey. I was excited about Scotch because I thought it was interesting.
You picked it because
and
Lex
different.
Luthor drinks Scotch. Don't lie.
I mean, that was part of it. Yeah, for sure, that was part of it. But also, like our mutual friend Andrew was into Scotch, and so I was like, oh, okay, I don't know. I just decided to try. I was new to whiskey, and I was just trying something, right? And so I started with Scotch. And I like Scotch, but I was finding it hard to sort of find the kind that I like. Very peaty, not less peaty, but bourbon is my Scotch, is my whiskey love. It's my favorite kind. I like rye too, but bourbon is.
I think bourbon's my favorite. I've also tried Scotch a few times, and it doesn't have enough meat on the bone for me. Like I think that's like it's not that it's like it can't decide what it wants to be, but it just like it's a little too distilled. I guess like it's okay. There's not enough substance to it. And so the whiskey bourbon is the life for me. And you got me this Maker's Mark, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So cheers to you. Thanks.
Cheers, buddy.
So Frank, we didn't really get to recap 2022. The stuff that came out, like stuff comes by, we do the show weekly, but there's still stuff out there that we like didn't ever talk about again, or like just stuff that we never connected on. Like, I don't know. Did you watch White Lotus? I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so what's some of the stuff that you just liked in 2022? Read it, watched it, listened to it, consumed it, whatever. Doesn't matter. Do you have anything? You hated everything.
Well, you mentioned White Lotus, and yeah, I right at the end of 2022, Marissa and I caught up on both seasons of White Lotus. Have you watched it at all?
Not a second. Is it worth my time?
Yes.
Okay.
It is excellent. It is excellent.
What is it? Because the trailers don't. Obviously they're not. They're trying to give. They're not trying. They're trying to hide what it is because they're not telling me anything. But by doing so, it just makes it.
It doesn't really entice based on the trailers.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah. So what is it?
The White Lotus is an anthology drama series on HBO Max.
Didn't know that.
So it's an anthology style. So each season covers a different set of characters, a different storyline. So each season is pretty much self-contained. So you can just watch season 2 and you will not be missing anything from season 1.
Oh, that's cool.
If you do watch season 1, there's a little bit of carryover from season 1 to season 2, but it's not the kind of thing that you need to have watched season 1 to understand. It's not like they're connected in any real meaningful way.
Gotcha.
So I don't want to spoil it by saying exactly what carries over, but I'll vaguely, a character is in both seasons, but that doesn't really matter.
Is it Jennifer Coolidge?
I would say start with season 2, honestly, because that's the one that everyone's talking about right now.
I see. Okay.
And if you like it, then watch season 1.
Okay. Can
that's
I
what I
just ask though? Like, what is you said it was an anthology series, but like, is it a drama? Is it a murder mystery?
It's a
drama? Like, what is it?
It's a drama. It covers the White Lotus, the
hotel,
the name comes from it is a hotel chain, a luxury hotel where we follow. Each season is a different location of this hotel. Season 1 is in Hawaii. Season 2 is in Sicily. And you are following the guests who are staying at the hotel in a certain, I think it's like a week or something like that. But people who are all staying at the hotel at the same time for a given period of time. Let's call it a week. So you're seeing all the different characters are people who are all staying at the hotel and the hotel staff. And you are it's one of those drama series that if you just describe it, it doesn't sound like much. It's like, okay, so it's people staying in a hotel and the guests and the staff.
No, hotels are interesting.
Right.
Hotels are interesting places.
It's a cross section of mostly American life, right? Because it's these Americans staying at this hotel in Hawaii, which is America, obviously, but then in Sicily, and how their stories overlap a little bit, how their stories overlap with the lives of the staff members at the hotel, and it's a very interesting, very subtle, very HBO commentary on modern American life. It covers, in a very subtle way, it covers things like, white privilege and white supremacy. It covers things like the lives of sex workers versus the lives of the mostly white male clientele who benefit from them and who take advantage of them. It talks about all sorts of it's a lot of social commentary, but in a very interesting character study kind of way. Got some great people in it. In season 1, you've got Alexandra Daddario and Connie Britton and Steve Zahn In season 2, you've got F. Murray Abraham and one of the guys from The Sopranos whose name is escaping me right now.
Tony. No, I don't know.
Nope. But he's dead. But yeah, some very
is he though? The screen
cool.
went blank, Frank. I don't know. Yeah. I just don't know.
I mean, in real life, he's dead.
Oh, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So it's some really, really cool storytelling. I didn't expect to like it. Didn't love it at first, but I gave it a season and came to really, really like it.
Okay.
It's written and I believe directed by Mike White, who is a screenwriter who's been in Hollywood for a while. Fun fact, he was on Survivor a few years ago. And he made it pretty close to the end. So I already knew him as a Survivor player, and then realized that, oh my God, that's the same Mike White who created White Lotus. That's crazy. So yeah, it's a really, really good show, and I recommend it.
Okay. All right. That was a pretty good give it with your best shot. That was nice.
Cool. Yeah. Mini best shot. What did you like in 2022? What did you watch, listen to, read, or otherwise consume?
I consumed a good amount of comics this year that we don't talk, because
I did not. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So it takes me sometimes like 3 or 4 days over the course of a week, even spread out, to read one issue of a comic now, right? I just don't have the time to get there. So
Parenthood.
Yeah, right. But there are actually books that I'm like current with still, because the story demanded that I actually read you. And some of them are actually a little surprising. So some are not. So Nightwing, Tom Taylor's Nightwing is just outstanding. What's a great way to describe Ultimate Spider-Man outstanding? If that makes sense. Wow. It's not like this.
That's high praise.
Yeah, it's not the same tone necessarily. Obviously, it's a different character or whatever.
But you liked it as much.
It's like every issue is like a cozy little blanket, and you just feel so good at the end of every issue. And you don't have to be a big Nightwing fan. You don't have to be a big Batman fan or anybody. You don't have to know diddly about any of it. And it just gives you really engaging characters, which I feel is a lot of times lacking from a Nightwing book. And so when it comes down to it, Dick Grayson is just the greatest person in the DCU apart from Superman. That's kind of its thesis, where Superman is always the top no matter what, right? Always does the right thing, is the moral A figure, whatever else. But Dick Grayson is the nicest guy in the DC universe. And that's no ego, no skin on it. It's just the biggest heart that there is. And that's the story that it tells. And it's really good. It's really good. So I recommend Nightwing for sure. Yeah.
If I can interject for one quick question, where did you jump on? Where would you recommend people jump on? Is there a?
I don't know.
Tom Taylor's been writing it for a few years now, hasn't he?
Yeah,
so
it's been one or of his run. Yeah, I would go back to the beginning of his run. It's one long story.
Okay,
and it's not that. It's maybe 2 graphic novel worth, maybe 3 at this point. Which you can read in 45 minutes, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's really not a huge commitment. But I would definitely do that. But going along with Superman, one of the other books that demanded that I read every week was Action Comics, which I wanted to tell you about. Really, I don't know if you were reading it at all, but basically,
I have not read. I've been so far behind on comics for a couple of years now.
Yeah, basically, Superman discovers that Warworld is being run, or I don't know. Run is not the right word. So Mongol, you've heard of him. You're familiar with his work.
Very familiar with Mongol, yeah.
So the way that the story did this, there's a lineage of Mongols, and the son always kills the father and becomes the next Mongol. And
wow.
Yeah, and so part of what they do is subjugate other alien races on Warworld, and they become these slaves. And there's a bunch of ancient Kryptonians on Warworld, like we called it Krypton, like Kryptonians, like really, really, really old. And so he's like, okay, John, you're Superman. I'm going to go to space and free these slaves. Like,
oh, so this is Clark.
This is Clark. Yeah, this is not John.
Okay.
Yeah, this is full on Clark. And so he takes this team with him. That's, it takes Natasha Irons and Midnighter and Apollo and what's his Truth Justice? What's so funny about Truth Justice the American Way? What's his name? The British guy with the purple hair. He was on Supergirl. And then he was on Star Trek Discovery.
Yes.
Manchester Black. That's it. Yeah, Manchester
Black. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he's part of the team. So and they go, and it's basically Spartacus with Superman. That's the easiest. That's the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a bit of Gladiator, a bit of Spartacus, like all that, like sword. It's like sword and sandal war world. Because he loses his powers, being on War World. So he's like, yeah, it's great. You know what it is? It's Spartacus meets John Carter plus Superman. Like, it actually, what I loved, it leans into the John Carter roots of Superman, by telling this John Carter-esque story. And it's really good. It's it just delivered every issue. And it just Superman's greatest strength is being a symbol of hope, and that is quite literally what that story is about, him giving hope to the hopeless, and it's just really good. And I if you want to I think that's Philip Kennedy Johnson is the writer, so I don't know the issues, but you can hop on and look to that. So I would recommend that for sure if you need somewhere to look, and it's unconnected to other books. You can just read action. You don't have to do anything else. It is, I like that, the story. I actually I don't know if you can see it because I have my selfie. Oh yeah, so I'm gonna move my head and you can actually see some art from it behind me, so excuse me.
Oh, that's pretty. Yeah,
it is.
That's pretty.
Yeah, that's
for our viewers, our listeners who cannot see, but Tim is showing me a few panels of some very pretty art of Superman on Warworld, I believe.
Yeah, it's Mikkel Janin. It's actually from Future State, but it's the story that Future State set up, and so it's Superman, and he's basically in gladiatorial gear, but the S crest is the Kingdom Come S. And it's just him with a giant axe and a shield because he doesn't really have powers, but he's still doing his Superman thing, and it's cool. It's very cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I found a list of the issues, which I'll add to the show notes so that if anyone who wants to read it, you can you'll know there's a reading list so that you can follow along as I plan to.
Great.
Warworld Saga by Philip Kennedy Johnson. And looks like Grant Morrison had something to do with this as well.
He wrote a one shot of the team getting together before they go to Warworld.
Gotcha.
Which was your typical Grant Morrison. I don't want to say nonsense because that makes it sound like everything he does is nonsense, but
yeah, it's pejorative, but I get what you mean.
Yeah. So not necessarily necessary reading, but it's okay.
Sure.
Something else that you took to that we have not really talked about, because obviously there's stuff that we did that we talked about, like Kenobi,
yes,
and other things. Probably,
sure.
Something
the Batman. We didn't talk about. Something we didn't talk about that I really, really spent a lot of time with in 2022. We've talked about Superman, one of my all-time great loves. Another one of my all-time great loves, as you know, Tim.
Oh, I know where you're going with this. Wait, can I say what I think it is? You're going to talk about the 6-hour Beatle documentary?
That was in 2021.
Okay,
so no,
I'm backing up.
Not.
I'm backing up off of the thing.
Also, it was closer to 9 hours. So put some respect on my guys' names. No, I'm talking about the 2022 re-release of the Beatles album Revolver.
Oh yeah.
So you were on the right track.
Yeah.
Revolver is their 1966 album. that is the precursor to their psychedelic era. It is right heading from the Mop Top era into the psychedelic era. It's the album that came out right before Sgt. Pepper's, which is really where they went psychedelic, right? So Revolver is the album that has Eleanor Rigby on it. It has Yellow Submarine on it. It has Taxman. It has a bunch of their songs.
It's okay. You don't have to remember the rest of them because those are the only two good ones on the album. That's my hot take on Revolver.
Okay, so you are fired from this podcast. And,
it's my least favorite Beatles album, Revolver.
Is it really your least favorite?
It's my least favorite. With the brilliance that is Eleanor Rigby, and I just every time another song comes on, because I have it, right? Because it's the Beatles. So, but like every time another one comes on, I'm like, no, this just doesn't do it for me. It never ever does it for me.
Okay, so I could write an entire. I have a thesis about why Revolver is so pivotal and so important, because it is the hinge between the album before it is is Rubber Soul, which is a very folk rock sort of Birds-esque album.
Yeah, I love Rubber Soul.
Revolver is sort of the hinge between Rubber Soul and Sgt. Pepper.
Listeners at home, every time Frank says hinge, he's moving the
word
fingers down to make
bending my fingers
to make a hinge.
Palm.
It's just wonderful imagery.
It is pivotal because it is a hinge. Because it starts with Taxman, and you've got Eleanor Rigby, you've got Yellow Submarine, and you've got Here, There, and Everywhere. You've got all these beautiful songs on it. And then it ends with Tomorrow Never Knows, which is an acid trip brought to life. It is Got to Get You Into My Life is on that album too. I mean, like a lot of great songs are on that album. I love it because it is. I personally love Rubber Soul and Revolver are like a two-parter for me. Where at the start of Rubber Soul, you're listening to Drive My Car and Norwegian Wood and
is Blackbird on there? I'm
looking through you. No, that's the White Album. It's a couple years later. But it's this, it's a lot of acoustic. Blackbird is very much in the spirit of it. It's very folky and acoustic on Rubber Soul.
In My Life,
a lot of it is
Rubber Soul. Yeah.
In My Life is on Rubber Soul. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then by the end of Revolver, the next album, you're looking at Tomorrow Never Knows, which is this experimental, psychedelic, literally acid-inspired track. So I love it because it takes you from the Mop Tops to the Sgt. Pepper era, the psychedelic era. I love that transition so much. I love watching them progress as songwriters, as studio musicians. One of my big, I've been thinking, I'm percolating on this idea for years, Tim, that period from 65 to 67 is their most productive, most creative era, their most transitional era, where you really see them change as songwriters and discover how to play the recording studio as an instrument. They really come into their own as recording artists. Anyway, you mentioned the 9-hour Get Back documentary that Peter Jackson made on Disney Plus. When he made that documentary, he developed this technology that most of the tapes that he was using to make the Get Back documentary were mono tapes that were just for the cameras to use. They were not the recording studio, stereo recording. They were just for the cameras to make a TV. They were making a TV movie, what they thought they were making. He developed this technology to take the mono tracks where all of the voices and instruments were all locked in on one track and you couldn't separate them. He developed this AI technology because of the pandemic. He had time where he was able to train an AI to recognize Paul's voice, John's voice, George's voice, Ringo's voice, each of their guitars, each of their instruments, so that he could separate them out. And AI was able to separate them out so he could mix it in stereo.
That's wild.
You could have, John's guitar on the left side and Paul's bass on the right side and their voices and whatever. He trained an AI how to do this. And the more he trained, once he had developed it and trained it more and more, it got better and better and better. They took that AI and they used it on the Revolver album. Which was recorded in stereo, but it was recorded on a 4-track tape machine. So you had multiple instruments locked together on a couple of tracks. So the guitar, bass, and drums were all recorded on one track. You could move all of those to the left or to the right, or in between. but they were all locked into whatever you had to one. You had to do all three of them because they were all locked in on the same tape. They applied that AI technology to the Revolver album, and now suddenly they were able to separate all the instruments, even separate like Ringo's drums. The bass drum could be here, and the tom-toms could be over here, and the cymbals could be over here. So for the first time, you could really play with the full stereo scope from left to right, and put the instruments in different places, and really feel like you're in the room with them as they're playing these songs. So they did that to Revolver, which is a beloved album and a very culturally significant album, and they were able to do a new mix of it, and I listened to it incessantly after it came out. Loved the new mix of it. People have opinions on whether or not you should do that to, like, well, the original mix is the mix of the Beatles worked on, blah, blah. Yes, it was, and it still exists, and you can listen to it as much as you'd like, but the new mix is an interesting new way of presenting the music to a new generation. It's mixed more like modern records are mixed, so that when it comes up on Spotify or Apple Music, a young person is going to hear it and it won't feel so weird, because why are three of the instruments in one ear and the vocals are in the other ear? Like, that's super off balance and weird right after, if you have it like on shuffle and you're listening to like Fleetwood Mac or I don't know, Billie Eilish or whatever, and then the Beatles comes up and that's a weird sound. It sounds more like a modern record does, and it really brings out a lot of things. There are instruments that you couldn't really hear because they were buried under other instruments in the mix, and now you can really appreciate them. And then the bonus tracks do a really interesting thing of showing how the songs were written, where you hear, like, for example, Yellow Submarine was this really sad folk song that John Lennon started on, where he's like, in the place where I was born, no one cared, no one cared. Like, that was the beginning of Yellow Submarine. He wrote the melody with these really sad like folk lyrics, and then when he got with Paul, they turned it into this like sort of children's song. But it's interesting to listen to a song evolve over the course of the bonus disc, where you hear like literally John singing into a cassette recorder in his bedroom, and you hear the next version until it sounds like the version that we know. It's cool. They do that with every song. So it's really, really cool to hear the new mix of the album and then listen to these bonus tracks and hear the songs evolve. So Revolver 2022 mix is it was a big thing I listened to this year and really, really loved.
Do you know if they're going to go back and use that AI on the albums they previously released? Because some of them are brand. I think Abbey Road was like a 2019 release. Like it's really recent.
It is. They didn't need to do that with Abbey Road because that was recorded on an 8-track machine. So the things were pretty separated already. Okay. And they did the White Album in 2018. They did Sgt. Pepper in 2017. They were able to go with those. They were able to go back to the source tapes, and most of the instruments were recorded individually because they were using newer technology by then. But 66 was the last year where they were using the old technology, and they needed this AI. The speculation is that they're now going to start going back in time and they did 66. Now maybe they can do 65, 64, 63, go back and do all the earlier albums using this AI.
Because the with the Beatles recordings is not the same. And Please Me too. The first album, they're both they were recorded on twin track, which is only 2 tracks, where literally you got 1 track for all the instruments and 1 track for all the vocals, and you can mix them, pan them around a little bit, but like you got 2 to work with, because mono at the beginning of the 60s, mono was it, right? And stereo was kind of a gimmick until the end of the 60s. So it sounds like they're going to probably go back. It sounds like Rubber Soul is probably the next thing. It's probably going to come out in 2023, a new mix of that. But yeah, Revolver, fantastic new mix of it. I recommend, if you really care, doing like an A/B, like listen side by side, like listen to one of the tracks, the 2009 remix or remaster, and then listen to the 2022 mix side by side and hear the whoa, the instruments are in totally different places in my left and right ears. That's what I would recommend. But anyway, Beatle nerd getting off his soapbox now. That was very good. That didn't necessarily convince me that I will like the music of Revolver more, but I will certainly appreciate the Hinge. And the technology, like that's enough for me. That's good.
If you don't like if the songs are not your thing, it's not going to change that. But it's a different listening.
But I can always appreciate how things work and how they're put together, which brings me to my last thing before we wrap up this episode. I read the Jim Henson biography by Brian J. Jones, in 2022. Came out a number of years ago, but it is definitely one of the best things that I read all year. Absolutely worth listening to, which is what I did, because the narrator has Jim's cadence, and then he ends up doing a lot of the Muppet voices when they come up, certain scenes come up as examples or whatever. And like, you want to call the Jim Henson Company and be like, hire this man, because he might already work for you. I'm not sure. But if he doesn't, hire this man, because his Muppets are spot on. It's amazing. His Bert, his Ernie, his Kermit, his Fozzie Bear, whatever. But it was a really good read, mostly because Jim Henson was a good person. And that is what my big takeaway was. That was like, there was so little like the sordid life of Jim Henson and how this will ruin the Muppets for you and whatever. At the end of it, I walked away like loving the Muppets even more, wanting to watch The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and like basically support Jim Henson in every single way that I possibly could. Like, even though he's been dead since 1991, like,
right.
But I like need to support him. Like, it was just wildly good. I don't know if have you read it? I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I haven't read. I read his George Lucas.
Yep, that's
biography.
which is also excellent. I loved his George Lucas biography. And so he has a Dr. Seuss one as well, and a Washington Irving one. Which, like, one of these things is not like the other.
Washington Irving one sounds that really catches my interest.
Yeah, and that is
but the Jim Henson one does as well.
Yeah, I would definitely do the Jim Henson one. Like, you've got nights where you've got to be up in the nursery, or you're going for a walk or whatever.
Yeah,
it's well worth your time. It's really good. Especially like in a this is how it works kind of way, like you said, in terms of the Muppetry, and even just what they fought for and the appreciation for Sesame Street and the Muppets, and why they were successful and why people love them, and why Disney can't replicate what has come before, or why they just can't like come back to why Muppet Christmas Carol is so important, because it's like the movie that they had to prove they could do something without Jim Henson. It was just really good. But what was also really good is that like it's also kind of like a weird mini biography for Frank Oz, because he's in it so much.
Oh, interesting.
So because he worked with Jim for decades, and so like you get the Jim Henson story, but you also weirdly intersect with the story of Frank Oz and Yoda and Star Wars and like all these other things that crop up. Like I'm pretty sure it's Frank Oz, or it might be another puppeteer that did the puppetry work for The Sound of Music. Like, you know, like for the Lonely Goat Herd.
What?
Yeah, right.
That's
like,
wild.
What's wild? Like, why would you know that otherwise? It's just like really cool stuff like that. Definitely worth your time.
Very cool.
Definitely one of the best things I read in 2022. So, but Frank, I think that brings us to the end of our episode. So tell the people where they can find us after you drink your beer, because you're drinking your beer. I'm sorry.
Find us. No, that's fine. You're fine. I shouldn't know better. You can find us at beerwithgeeks.com, at thoughtbubbleaudio.com. You can support us at patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio. You can email us at beerwithgeeks@gmail.com. And you can not really so big on Twitter anymore, but you can follow me at frank@ramblings.social if Mastodon is your thing. Beer with Geeks on pretty much, anywhere you care to look. And if you want to throw a couple bucks at us, Patreon is great. If you want to throw us a Apple Podcasts review or rating, that would be much appreciated. Or just subscribe to us wherever you're listening to us right now, so you don't miss an episode, and tell a friend. And that'll basically do it for us.
All right. Well said, Frank. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.